Hey Raider fans, I know it's been a while. I've been telling you guys I'm going to make this video, and we're a few days from the draft. It is very exciting, nerve-wracking. I still don't think I know where the Raiders are going to pick. A couple of my thoughts, and obviously, like I've said it before, if you're new to my channel, I've said this before, I'm not a big college fan, so knowing these people and names is basically heard by whatever you're hearing from their sources. Obviously I can only speak from watching the Raider games and where our holes were last year and what I think would benefit from us, and here are my thoughts in the sense. So obviously there's been a lot of concerns of where we're going to pick and if we're going to do any kind of trading back to drop ourselves into a lower position to get someone that may not be better at a pick six. So I think for a while, like I said, I'm not a big college fan. I was so hoping we would get a quarterback, but I feel that people that do watch quarterbacks in college as well, in comparison to this QB class, not saying that these quarterbacks are terrible, but to be picking them where they're at in the high level of numbers doesn't seem like a smart idea. But when you're that needy for a quarterback, you got to do what you got to do. So changing my tune. Before, I was definitely wanting Shedeur at, 6. But I think someone made a really good chart about where they compare these quarterbacks, this class, in comparison to the last year's class. And from what I gathered, a lot of the other quarterbacks that were picked early in the rounds last year are better than the ones that are coming out this year. Now, I don't think Shedeur is a terrible person. I don't think he's a terrible pick, whoever does pick him. I think he has the mentality to prove that he's worth whatever team is going to pick him up and be a contested winner. I think he has that drive and talent and stuff like that. So that's very exciting to see. Do I think we're going to pick him at 6? I'd be very surprised now, especially with the Kolton Miller coming out with him wanting an extension or a re-changing of his contract. It puts us in a position now which I mean, at the same time, can I be mad of where Kolton Miller's coming from? No. I mean, he's on his final year, and you want that contract because if this is your final year, you happen to get injured, there is going to be a bargaining with that obviously with the left tackle being one of the most important positions. The question becomes, do you let him not walk, I hope they don't let him walk, but do you let him contest free agency the year that comes? Absolutely not. That's a bare minimum no. I think we've learned from our previous past of letting people who didn't want to, but like for example Derek Carr, and I know people hate Derek Carr, but we didn't get any trade value from him. So do I think Kolton Miller is someone that we should trade? I think if you can't get a deal sometime before the season starts and he's going to hold out, you may decide to start thinking about what are your options of trading for next year or this year. I think at this point, the fact that they still haven't gotten a contract is concerning for me, or they just don't know what our value is for him at this point. Not that I say he's not valuable, but to what degree and how much is the question. So obviously now with that Kolton Miller, you're kind of put in a position where your offensive tackle, is now one of your offensive linemen who has been consistent for the last few years, with the exception of last year. He did get injured and was out for half the season. That's a big deal. So I am like mixed emotions. Do I like Kolton Miller? Of course I like Kolton Miller. However, do I think it's worth, thinking that at this point we should pick up someone, an offensive lineman, this year like we did last year? I think that was a great thing that we did with Powers doing so great. There was, I forgot who the other one was that did really good last year, but they did such a great picking up these people in young talent. So would I be opposed of picking an offensive tackle in the pick 6? Not really. I think that's a really smart idea, considering, like I said, you have Kolton Miller, who is coming off an injury. We don't know what his status is, what his conditioning is, whether or not he's going to be able to be 100% coming into the season. Do you take the risk of giving him a guaranteed big contract knowing that he's just coming off an injury? Don't know if that's the smartest idea. However, I understand that left tackle is the most expensive and most important part of the team. So you can't just let it walk either. So we're in a definitely tough position now, considering that is now something that's already started to brew before the draft. The other thing, obviously, is running back situation. After Josh Jacobs, we have not really, obviously Mostert was going to pick up. I think that's going to be a nice bridge to whatever we decide to do in the future. However, the running back situation, I said even before Josh Jacobs left, I said Josh Jacobs losing him was going to be a big hole to this offense because he did a lot of work for us when he was with us. And even though it didn't seem on paper and stats, when you actually watch games, you see how much he puts in the effort for the team to basically take away from, I just think he was just a good running back in the sense that people underestimated him last year when he was, before, like when we had him lost. I think they underestimated his ability to break tackles, and I've always been a Josh Jacobs fan. So seeing him, obviously succeed in Green Bay was not surprising to me. I've said it before. He struggled the year before we let him go because of the fact that we didn't have a strong offensive line. You didn't have a quarterback that was consistent enough throughout the season that all these other teams were not going to stack the box. So now, with that being said, Jeanty being another conversation of whether or not do we pick him at 6. There's conversations that other people are going to try to pick him up before that, which people are saying he's talented to the point that he's in comparison to Alvin Kamara, which honestly, getting a running back at the 6 wouldn't make me upset either, because I think you have to give this team offensive depth. You have Bowers, who's been consistently great all season, but at the same time, when you don't have all the other offensive weapons, like a, X receiver or, Jacoby Mayer doing great, however, like a superstar like Devontae Adams or a superstar like, Tyreek Hill, like stuff like that, where they're not going to evenly, have that spread of defense. Brock Bowers is very great in that, and he's been doing that for us. However, having an additional person like Jeanty would be nice, because it also not only, you have to respect the run game, then you have to respect the wide receiver, because, Jacoby Meyers is great. I think if we have another running back that we add to this depth that is a, rookie that's really going to show out, that could be a potential for us in the sense of, making our offense to the extreme the best at this point. You do have Geno Smith, who's great at, throwing the ball, running the ball, spreading the ball to that degree. It is very difficult. I don't blame the GM this year, because you have certain holes that you can't replace. I mean, I've been told from, obviously this draft class for running backs, you don't really need Jeanty at the 6th pick, but there's other, running backs that could fall to us in the, either trade into the 1st or into the 2nd. They're still really great quality running backs. The other concern is whether or not, do you pick up your bridge quarterback this year or next year? And that's hoping that next year, you have ability to go up and get someone that's a caliber quarterback to be bridge for Geno Smith. Now, Geno Smith is just a temporary fix until we figure out the quarterback situation. So at the 6th pick, you're kind of like, well, we still need a quarterback eventually. So where do you wait for this year or next year? It's a very difficult decision, and it's going to be very interesting in how this team will pick. Spytek is going to have a hard time. Not a hard time. I think I trust him enough to know what's the smartest decision for us, whether we fall to whatever falls to us at the 6th. Obviously, there's Tyreek Wilson that's being talked about being traded. I have mixed emotions. I think the fact that we picked Tyreek Hill to begin with, the year that we picked him up instead of Jalen Carter, was it Jalen Carter? I believe it was Jalen Carter, was kind of already bad on our end, because it showed that obviously Jalen Carter was better. Jalen Carter? I'm pretty sure it was Jalen Carter. Maybe I'm wrong. Whatever. Either way, he chose to be the one that was better than the two. So, it's just like you can't. Draft midday makes me nervous, because, eventually you look back at these picks and you think to yourself, wow, we wish we should have done that better. We should have done this instead. So I think last year was nice, because Brock Bowers, even though I was very hesitant to understand why we would pick another tight end, when you had Meyers, who did a great job, the question becomes is now, do you also think about trading Meyers? Even though I do think Meyers was a good offensive role in this last year's season, because you didn't know which tight end they were going to. A majority of the time they do want to target Bowers, but at the same time you have both of them, which did help aiding in the line because our line sucked for the most part without Colton Miller. So that kind of gave a little bridge and some kind of benefit for this team. It's just very difficult, and honestly, I don't even know if there's an actual wrong decision except for maybe a quarterback if we pick him at the 6. It's just, depending on who falls to us at 6 is going to be the best person that's on the board. I don't know. I mean, what do you guys think? Do you think that we need to pick a running back, or do you think we need an offensive lineman? With all these things that are going on, I think it's very chaotic. We have a few days before the draft, so it'll be interesting to see how moving pieces happen. Now, Tyreek Wilson, like I said, I kind of touched base. I think that, getting him traded into his 3rd year where he's been progressing every year is a kind of upsetting as a Raider fan because, like I said, we know we picked him up, 2-3 years ago as our 1st round pick, and now to trade that away and probably not get that same value of what we put into him and actually training him time. And then, we're talking about maybe a 3rd, if we're lucky, 3rd, 4th round pick. I don't like that idea unless there's something that they think that they're going to be worth picking up there, or using that to collect draft picks to go up in a draft, which I could see that happening as well. I just don't think it's worth the risk because I feel that, Patrick Emmett has done a great job working with him. So seeing him for another year and progressing in improvement with consistency and, the defensive coach there, it's worth keeping him another year. I mean, do you extend him to out of his rookie contract? I think this is the year to see. Now, this is a good time to see if he's worth trading for because, like I said, everybody's going to see that he's been improving every year. So it's going to be nice to compare and whether or not it's worth it. I think there's a lot of questions, and draft day is only a few days from now. So it'll be very interesting now what we do. Geno Smith is a great pickup, so I'm hoping, the certain ones that we picked up are going to be enough for us to be good enough to be contenders this season. Obviously, we've had the concerns of coaching and putting the right quarterback in. I don't think Geno Smith is going to be that issue. I don't think he's going to have a problem competing in the preseason and proving that he is worth starting in comparison to AOC. Now, the question becomes is, do you trade AOC too? I mean, I don't think you should because you do need a backup in the event something happens where you're injured. And a lot of these teams are still kind of looking for quarterbacks and even depth in their quarterback situation. So, that being said, I really have no idea what they're going to do. And I'd be surprised on, draft day as much as I think everybody else has. I don't even think that we saw Bowers coming to us last year, so anything goes. Tell me what you guys think. Do you think we need to pick certain players? And what is the ones that you think that we can just wait on and, wait for this next year coming up or whatever the case be? And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the week. Bye.